If you dance this waltz, you marry my son. Millionaire mocked, but the point isn't that I was secretly a champion, she would say. The crystal chandelier in the Grand Meridian is that I was worthy of respect even when I was just a maid. Marble floor as my dancing didn't make me valuable. Last wine glass for the I was always valuable. The dancing just made them see it. Precision, and in her studio, where the mirrors reflected not just bodies but dreams, where the music played for anyone who wanted to hear it, where janitors and CEOs learned side by side, that lesson lived on. Because everyone has a story. Everyone has a gift, to be just another event, and everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves the chance to dance. Even noticed she existed. The story of "If you dance this waltz, you marry my son" became more than just a viral moment or a modern fairy tale. Her story, it became a movement, reminder that beneath every uniform they wear, behind every service counter, on the wall within every person we pass without seeing, there might be a champion, a genius, a hero, or simply a human being deserving of dignity and respect. Amelia adjusted her black and white maid uniform. All it takes is one dance, one moment of courage, one person willing to stand up and say, "I am more than you think I am," to change everything. Gregory Whitmore Amelia Santos proved that on a night when a millionaire's mockery became her stage, when a cruel bet became her opportunity, and when a waltz became her revolution. He was 62 years old. She had been invisible for 20 years, but when she finally let herself be seen, she didn't just dance. Probably cost more than Amelia made in a year. And in soaring, she lifted everyone around her, showing them that the only thing more powerful than prejudice is the courage to stand up and dance in spite of it. Looking for an escape route. Gregory himself steps down from his company's board, his son Daniel taking over with a very different vision for the future. "You represent the Whitmore." And Amelia? She opened a dance studio in the neighborhood where she lived, offering free classes to anyone who worked in service industries. The studio was called "Invisible No More," and above the door was a simple plaque that read, "Everyone has a story." The tension between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. But Gregory just laughed. Everyone deserves to dance. That cold laugh that made employees shiver. 6 months later, Daniel and Amelia were married in a simple ceremony at her studio, surrounded not by society's elite but by hotel workers, janitors, security guards, and others who had been inspired by her story to pursue their own dreams. Amelia heard every word as she arranged champagne, a changed man who spent most of the reception talking to the servers, learning their names, their stories, their dreams. The waltz they danced at their wedding was the same one from that night at the hotel, but this time, Daniel danced with her, having learned from the best teacher in the world. Amelia moved between them as they spun around the floor. Amelia whispered in his ear, "Your father's cruel bet gave me my life back." Daniel pulled her closer and whispered back, "And it gave me mine." The crowd applauded, but this time it wasn't for a performance or a show. He would grab Daniel's arm and drag him into another conversation, for the proof that sometimes the worst intentions can lead to the best outcomes, and that everyone, regardless of their uniform or their station, has the potential for greatness. This is the years later, when people told the story of the night a millionaire mocked a maid only to discover she was a dance champion, they would focus on different parts. Or, some loved the romance, the unlikely love story between the heir and the maid. Each time, others focused on the comeuppance, the bully getting his just desserts, then find an excuse to slip away. But Amelia always emphasized a different lesson when she told the story to her students. It was during many of whom were service workers pursuing their dreams. Daniel, why didn't you tell anyone who you were? Why stay hidden for so long? As she carried a full tray Amelia looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. Shattering across the marble because I was afraid, champagne spraying across several guests' afraid that if people knew who I used to be, they would pity me for what I had become. Glass. And I couldn't bear pity. The entire ballroom went silent. Invisibility was better than pity. Turning to stare at the scene. Daniel nodded, understanding more than she might have expected. But she immediately "I've been invisible too," he said quietly, apologizing profusely, just in a different way. It hadn't been her fault. "Hidden behind my father's expectations, his money, his name," she whispered, her voice tonight, watching you dance, watching you stand up to him, it was like seeing someone break free from prison. Face turned purple, and it made me realize that I'm still lost in mine. Shoes crunching on the they stood there for a moment, two people from different worlds who had found something in common in the most unlikely way. That dinner, Amelia said finally, glasses cost? How about tomorrow night? More than you make in a month. Daniel smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all evening. To help Amelia. I would like that very much. It was my fault. The video of Amelia's dance went viral within hours, but Gregory shared millions of times with captions like, "Maid reveals she's world champion," and "Millionaires." This is what happens when they hire people who don't belong in places like this. News outlets picked up the story, and within a week, Amelia Santos was a household name again, but for entirely different reasons than before. Obvious racism in his tone. She appeared on talk shows, always wearing simple clothes, always speaking quietly but firmly about the dignity of work and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are. You know what? The Gregory Whitmore Foundation, which had been a tax shelter disguised as charity, was transformed into a genuine organization dedicated to providing scholarships and support for service workers seeking education or career changes. Full of malice and superiority. "Now," she said, turning to the crowd, "I have a question for all of you. A bet. How many of you walked past me tonight before this happened?" He walked to the center of the room. "How many of you have been served by me for years without ever asking my name?" This woman here, the uncomfortable shifting in the crowd was answering on her knees. Obviously, Patricia Harriman was the first to step forward. Even the simplest job. "I've attended events here for 5 years, she said, her voice shaking. The crowd murmured. "You've served me hundreds of times, and I never once looked you in the eye." Where this was heading. "I'm ashamed." If she can dance a proper waltz. One by one, others came forward with similar confessions, the evening transforming from a charity gala into something else entirely. Imagine that, perhaps, or a moment of collective awakening. Maid who can't even carry the hotel manager, who had been watching from the corner, approached Amelia with tears in his eyes. Some people genuinely amused, "Ms. Santos, others laughing out of discomfort or obligation. If I had known." Daniel's face had gone pale. But Amelia held up her hands clenched into fists at his sides. Would it have mattered? "Dad, should it matter? Stop this. Should I have to be a former world champion to be treated with respect?" But Gregory just laughed. He had no answer for that, because they both knew the truth. "I'm offering her the opportunity." By the end of the evening, Amelia had received dozens of job offers, from dance studios wanting her to teach, to corporations wanting her to speak about diversity and respect in the workplace. Amelia slowly stood up, but she turned them all down, at least for the moment. Still bleeding. "I need to think," she looked at Gregory Whitmore for a long moment. "For 20 years, and something I've been someone else." Made him step back slightly. "Now I need to figure out who Amelia Santos is in this new world. Something deeper." Daniel drove her home that night in silence, both of them processing everything that had happened. Or memory. When they reached her small apartment building, he walked her to the door. "Cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes," Gregory said, about your story, your strength, and maybe, if you're willing, you could teach me to dance, and you'll marry my son." Amelia studied him for a long moment, and you're fired, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine respect in his posture. The threat hung in the air like she said finally, designed to make her back down, and we'll see where it goes from there into submission. "But your father needs to do something first." No one expected. She turned back to Gregory. She smiled. "You need to apologize." Not a happy smile, not a defeated smile. Not just to me, but to every person in this room that you've treated as less than human because of their job, their race, she said, or their economic status. The ballroom erupted in gasps and exclamations. The ballroom held its breath again, blinked, waiting to see if Gregory Whitmore, millionaire businessman and notorious bully, would bend his knee to a woman he had tried to humiliate, and set it on a nearby table. The battle of wills lasted for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. "Mr. Whitmore." Gregory's face went through another series of transformations as he realized he had no way out. Every part of it. Too many witnesses. In front of all too many recordings. Too much evidence of his cruelty. Closer. Phones his reputation, the thing he valued above all else, was hanging by a thread, and only Amelia could save it. They had ever witnessed. Finally, slowly, laughed again, he spoke, but it sounded forced now. "I apologize," uncertain, he said through gritted teeth. "Fine. Louder," someone Amelia said. "And let's see this maid try to dance." Gregory took a deep breath, but as the orchestra something in him seemed to break. Amelia walked when to the center of the dance floor. His voice was different, smaller, almost human. Confusion. "I apologize, Miss Santos. Walked. I have treated you and others with disrespect and cruelty that was unforgivable. Her steps I let my wealth and position blind me to the humanity of those I considered beneath me. When she reached the center of the floor, she stood completely and utterly wrong. Her chin raised. The apology continued for several minutes, and by the end, Gregory Whitmore was crying, perhaps for the first time in decades. Or perhaps whether they were tears of humiliation or genuine remorse, no one could say, but they were real. Not a maid about to be mocked. When he finished, Amelia nodded once, accepting the apology without forgiving the years of cruelty that had preceded it, and her answer would change everything. Daniel asked, genuinely curious, she said, then paused. Amelia turned to him, and her expression softened slightly. "I was known by another name. For the right moment to remind the world that everyone has a story, everyone has value, and everyone deserves respect. The silence that followed was deafening. Your father just gave me the perfect stage. Gregory Whitmore's mouth fell open. She looked around the ballroom at all the faces watching her, some with admiration, in the crowd, others with shame as they remembered their own dismissive treatment of her over the years. Amelia Santos had been a legend in the dance world. I gave up dancing to care for my mother when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Before disappearing, I spent every penny I had on her care, sold everything I owned, and when she finally passed 5 years ago, I had nothing left but death and memories. And now so I took this job, and I've been invisible ever since. Blood on her hands, about to until dance tonight. For her dignity. The room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, heavy with emotion and recognition. She was. Several people were crying openly, others looking at their own hands as if seeing them for the first time. Warming up muscles. But here's what you need to understand, Amelia continued, her voice growing strong left behind. I'm not special. Play the music. There are millions of us, people you walk past every day without seeing. Immediately raised his baton. The janitor who speaks 5 languages, the security guard with a PhD, and the cashier who could have been a surgeon if life hadn't gotten in the way. What happened next would be talked about for years. We're all around you, invisible, keeping your world running while you pretend we don't exist. A legend that would outlive everyone. Gregory tried one more time to salvage something from the wreckage of his dignity. Finally lets themselves fly again. You can't seriously expect my son to marry you. This is extortion. Their skin is. But Daniel surprised everyone, including Amelia, by laughing. The Grand Meridian Hotel Dad, for once in your life, the transformation was instant and absolute. He turned to Amelia. The moment the music began, Ms. Santos, would you do me the honor of having dinner with me? Or perhaps she became not because of my father's stupid bet, but because I would genuinely like to know more about you. Her first steps were simple. People jumping to their feet, some crying, others shouting bravo at the top of their lungs. Several people rushed forward, wanting to touch her, to confirm she was real, to be part of this moment that they knew would become legend. Held its breath. But Amelia stood slowly, across the floor as if she weighed and walked directly to Gregory Whitmore. As if gravity was merely a suggestion. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a path between them. Her arms created perfect lines. Mr. Whitmore, she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the continued applause. Uniform flowed around I believe you owe me a wedding proposal. Or rather, your son does. Could see her younger self. Gregory's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound coming out. She had become. His carefully constructed world of superiority and control had just crumbled in front of 200 witnesses, many of whom were still recording. Daniel stepped forward before his father could speak. Ms. Santos, he said, his voice respectful but firm. Santos. You've more than won the challenge. Spread through the crowd like wildfire. You've given us all a gift tonight, showing us what true grace looks like. As they saw pictures of a younger turned to his father on stages around the world. And you've shown us what true ugliness looks like too. By her partners. Gregory finally found his voice. Heard none of this. This is ridiculous. She was lost in the music. It was a joke. In the feeling of coming home. No court would hold me to a drunken jest. But Amelia smiled, in a story that same dangerous smile from earlier. Every turn a chapter in a book. Mr. Whitmore, I've been recording our entire interaction on this. Her loss. She pulled out a small device from her pocket, including your threats to have me fired and blacklisted if I didn't accept your challenge. If she had made the right choice. I think any court would find that very interesting. She had put on the maid's uniform for the color drained from Gregory's face as he realized the implication. Serviceability. She set this up. 1,000 small humiliations. Amelia shook her head. The people who looked through her. No, the assumptions made about her intelligence. You set this up. Her humanity. I just knew that men like you always do. Strength. The iron will. You see someone you think is beneath you, and you can't resist the urge to step on them, as the music to humiliate them, to prove your superiority. Performed a series of movements. I've been cleaning up after men like you for 8 years, listening to your conversations, watching your cruelties, spun in perfect fouettes. One leg been her signature move, a combination of Latin and classical techniques that she had invented herself, she launched into that had won her the world championship 3 times in a row. Signature move, a Daniel Whitmore stood transfixed, his eyes never leaving Amelia's face, that had won her the world championship. He saw something there that he recognized, something he understood in his bones. Transfixed, his eyes the weight of expectations, the burden of being someone you're not, the exhaustion of playing a role that was chosen he understood in his bones. When she danced past him, their eyes met for just a moment, and in that moment, an entire conversation took place without words. When she danced past him, their eyes met for just a moment, and in that moment, an entire conversation took place without words. Had backed up against a pillar, his face cycling through emotions like a broken television. Respect. Rage,
Gregory
fear,
Whitmore,
disbelief,
meanwhile,
humiliation,
against
and something else,
his face
something that
cycling
looked
through
almost
emotions
like awe
like a
before it
broken
was quickly
television.
suppressed.
Rage,
He
fear,
pulled out his
disbelief,
phone, frantically
humiliation,
typing,
and
trying to
something
find
else,
some way out of
something
the
that
trap
looked
he had
almost
set
like
for
awe
himself.
before it was quickly suppressed.
But every search just confirmed
pulled out
what
his
everyone
phone,
could see with their own
frantically
eyes.
trying to find some
This
way
was
out of the
Amelia
trap he had set
Santos,
for himself.
one of the greatest dancers of her
But every
generation,
search just
and he had
confirmed
just
what
publicly
everyone
bet
could
his
see
son's
with their
marriage
own
on her
eyes.
inability to dance.
This was Amelia
The
Santos,
music began to
one
slow,
of the greatest
approaching
dancers
its
of her
end,
generation,
and Amelia
he had
moved
just
into her
publicly
final
bet his
sequence.
son's marriage on her inability to
She had
dance.
saved the best for last,
The music
a series
began
of
to
movements
slow,
so difficult
approaching
that
its
even at
end,
her peak,
and Amelia
she had only
moved into her
performed them in
final
her most
sequence.
important competitions.
She had saved the best
The
for
entire
last,
ballroom
a
seemed
series
to
of
hold its
movements
breath
so
as she
difficult
built to
that
the
even at her
climax,
peak,
each
she had
movement
only
more
performed them
impossible
in her
than the
most
last.
important competitions.
Then, in a moment that would be replayed millions of times online, she performed a move that no one had seen before or since, a spinning leap that seemed to suspend her in midair for an impossible length of time, her body creating a perfect line against the chandelier's light, before landing in a deep curtsy just as the last note faded away. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then the ballroom exploded.
Just as the last note
The
faded
applause
away.
was deafening.
The silence
As
lasted
if gravity
for
was
exactly
merely a
3
suggestion
seconds.
she could choose to ignore.
Then the ballroom exploded.
Her arms created
The
perfect
applause
lines,
was deafening.
her turns were sharp and clean,
People
and
jumping
her
to their
dress,
feet,
that
some
simple
crying,
maid's uniform,
others shouting
flowed around her
bravo
like it was
at the
made
top
of
of
silk
their
and
lungs.
starlight.
Several
People would later
rushed
swear
forward,
they could see her
wanting to
younger
touch her,
self
to
superimposed
confirm she
over her
was
current
real,
form,
to be part
the
of this
champion she
moment
had
that
been
they knew
shining
would
through the
become
woman
legend.
she had become.
But Amelia
Oh my
stood
God,
slowly,
whispered
gracefully,
Patricia Harriman,
and walked
a
directly
society
to
matron
Gregory
who had
Whitmore.
attended every major
The
cultural
crowd
event
parted
for
like the
30
Red
years.
Sea, creating a path
I saw her
between them.
dance at Carnegie Hall in
Mr. Whitmore,
2002.
she said, her voice
It's really
carrying
her.
clearly despite the continued
It's really
applause.
Amelia Santos.
I believe you owe
The
me a
whisper
wedding
spread through
proposal.
the crowd like wildfire,
Or rather,
people
your
pulling
son
out
does.
phones to Google her name,
Gregory's
gasping
mouth
as they
opened
saw
and closed
pictures
like
of
a
a
fish
younger
out of
Amelia
water,
on
no
stages
sound
around the
coming
world,
out.
holding trophies,
His
being
carefully
lifted in
constructed
triumph
world
by
of
her partners.
superiority and control had
But
just
Amelia
crumbled in front
heard
of
none of
200
this.
witnesses, many of
She
whom
was
were
lost
still
in the
recording.
music, in the movement,
Daniel
in the feeling
stepped
of
forward
coming
before
home
his
after
father
20
could
years
speak.
of exile.
Ms. Santos,
Every step
he
was a
said,
word in a
his voice
story she had
respectful
stopped
but firm.
telling, every turn a
You've
chapter
more
in a
than won
book
the
she had
challenge.
closed.
You've
She
given us
danced
all
her
a gift
pain,
tonight,
her loss,
showing us
her
what true
years of
grace looks
invisibility.
like. He
She
turned to
danced the
his
nights
father.
she had cried herself to
And
sleep,
you've shown us what
wondering
true
if she had
ugliness
made the
looks
right
like
choice.
too.
She
Gregory
danced the
finally
morning
found
she
his
had put on the
voice.
maid's uniform for the
This
first
is
time,
ridiculous.
her hands shaking as she
It was
traded
a joke.
sequins for serviceability.
No court would hold me
She
to a
danced
drunken
1,000
jest.
small humiliations,
But Amelia
the people who
smiled,
looked through
that same
her, the
dangerous smile
assumptions
from
made about
earlier.
her intelligence, her
Mr.
worth,
Whitmore,
her
I've
humanity.
been recording our entire
And
interaction
she danced
on
her
this.
strength,
She pulled
the
out a
iron will
small
that had
device
kept her
from her
going
pocket,
when everything she
including
loved
your
had been
threats to
taken
have me
away.
fired and blacklisted if
As
I
the
didn't
music
accept your
reached its
challenge.
crescendo,
I
Amelia
think any
performed a
court would
series of
find that
movements
very
that should have been
interesting, don't
impossible
you?
for someone who hadn't
The
danced
color drained
professionally
from
in 2
Gregory's
decades.
face as he realized the
She
implications.
spun in perfect fouettes,
You-
one leg
you set
whipping
this
around
up.
as she turned again and
Amelia
again,
shook
her
her
spot
head.
never wavering.
No, Mr.
Then
Whitmore.
she launched into a sequence
You
that
set
had.
this up.
Amelia
I just knew
Santos
that
had been a
men like you
legend in the
always
dance
do.
world, winning every
You see
major
someone you
competition
think is
from
beneath
age
you,
16 to
and you can't
25,
resist the urge
before
to step on
disappearing
them,
suddenly
to
at the height
humiliate
of her
them,
career.
to prove your superiority.
She had been on magazine
I've
covers,
been cleaning
in
up after men
documentaries,
like you for
had
8
danced
years,
for presidents
listening to
and
your
royalty.
conversations, watching
And
your
now she
cruelties,
stood in front of
waiting.
them in a maid's uniform,
Waiting for
blood
what?
on her hands, about
Daniel
to dance
asked,
for her dignity.
genuinely curious.
That's impossible, Gregory
Amelia
stammered.
turned to him, and her expression
Amelia
softened
Santos
slightly.
she was.
For the right moment to remind
But his
the world
voice
that
trailed
everyone
off as
has a
Amelia
story,
began to
everyone
move,
has value,
just small
and
movements
everyone
at first,
deserves respect.
warming up muscles that remembered
Your
every
father
step,
just gave me
every
the perfect
turn,
stage.
every moment of glory from
She
a life
looked
she
around
had
the
left
ballroom,
behind.
at all the faces
Play
watching
the
her,
music,
some
she
with
commanded,
admiration,
and her
others
voice
with
carried
shame
such
as they
authority
remembered
that the
their own
orchestra
dismissive
leader
treatment of her
immediately
over the
raised his
years.
baton.
20
The
years
first
ago,
notes of the
I
Blue
gave up
Danube
dancing
Waltz
to
filled
care
the
for
air,
my mother
and
when she was
Amelia
diagnosed
Santos
with
began to
Alzheimer's.
dance.
I
What
spent
happened
every
next
penny
would
I
be
had on
talked
her
about
care,
for years,
sold everything
shared in
I owned,
videos that would go
and when she
viral
finally
within
passed
hours,
5 years
and become
ago,
a legend
I
that
had
would
nothing
outlive
left
everyone
but
in
debt
that room.
and memories.
Because when
So I
someone
took
who was
this
born
job,
to dance
and I've been
finally lets
invisible ever
themselves fly again. It doesn't matter what uniform they wear or what job they do or what color their skin is. But it was a different kind of silence. Magic is magic, and that night, magic filled the Grand Meridian Hotel crying openly. Others looking at their own hands. The transformation was instant and absolute for the first time. The moment the music began, Amelia Santos became someone else entirely, or perhaps she became who she had always been underneath the uniform and the years of hiding. There are millions of us,
people you
Her
walk
first
past
steps were
every day
simple,
without
just
seeing.
the basic waltz pattern,
The janitor
but executed with such precision and grace that several professional dancers in the audience leaned forward, recognizing technique that took decades to perfect.
We're all around you.
Then she began to truly dance,
keeping your world
and the
running
room
while you
held its
pretend we
breath.
don't exist.
She moved across
Gregory
the floor
tried
as
one
if she
more
weighed
time
nothing.
to salvage something from the wreckage
Gregory
of his
blinked,
dignity.
certain he had heard
You
wrong.
can't seriously expect
What
my
did you
son
say?
to marry you.
Amelia pulled
This is
off her
extortion.
apron, folded it carefully,
But Daniel
and
surprised
set it on a
everyone,
nearby table.
including Amelia.
I
by
said I
laughing.
accept your challenge,
Dad,
Mr. Whitmore.
for once in your life,
But
just
when I
stop
win,
talking.
and I will win,
You'll
turned
keep
to
your
Amelia.
word.
Every
Miss
part of
Santos,
it.
would you do me the
In
honor
front of all
having
these
dinner with me?
witnesses.
Not
The
because
crowd
of my
pressed
father's
closer,
stupid bet,
phones coming
but
out
because
to
I would
record what
genuinely
was surely
like to
about to
know
be
more
either
about
the
you.
most embarrassing moment of
About
this
your
woman's
story,
life or
your
the most
strength,
shocking
and
upset
maybe,
they had
if
ever
you're
witnessed.
willing, you could teach me to
Gregory
dance.
laughed again, but
Amelia
it sounded
studied
forced
him
now,
for a long
uncertain.
moment, seeing the sincerity
Fine.
in his eyes, the genuine
Someone
respect
put on a
in his
waltz.
posture.
Let's
Just
see this
dinner,
maid try
she
to
said
dance.
finally.
But
And
as
we'll
the
see
orchestra
where it goes
prepared
from
to
there.
play, Amelia
But your
walked to the
father
center of
needs
the
to do
dance
something
floor with a
first.
bearing that made several
She
people
turned
frown
back
in
to Gregory.
confusion.
You
This
need to
wasn't how a
apologize.
defeated person walked.
Not just to me.
This
but
wasn't
to
how
every
someone
person
about
in
to
this
be
room that
humiliated
you've treated
carried
as less than
themselves.
human because of their job,
Her steps
their
were
race,
measured,
or
precise,
their economic
each
status.
movement deliberate and controlled.
And you need to mean it.
When she reached the center
ballroom
of the
held its
floor,
breath
she
again,
stood
waiting
perfectly
to see if
still,
Gregory
her chin
Whitmore,
raised,
millionaire
her shoulders
businessman
back,
and
and
notorious
in that
bully,
moment,
would bend
something
his knee to a
shifted in the
woman he had
room's
tried to
atmosphere.
humiliate.
The bleeding
battle
had
of
stopped
wills
on her
lasted
hands,
for 30
or
seconds
perhaps
that
she had
felt like
simply
30
decided to
years.
ignore it, but she stood
Gregory's
there like a
face
queen
went through
about to
another
address her
series of
court,
transformations
not a maid
as he
about to be
realized
mocked.
he had no way out.
"What's your name?"
Too
someone
many
called out
witnesses,
from the crowd.
Too many recordings.
Amelia
too much
turned
evidence of
toward
his
the
cruelty.
voice, and her answer would
His
change
reputation,
everything.
the thing he valued
"My
above
name is
all
Amelia
else,
Jackson,"
was hanging
she
by a
said,
thread,
then
and
paused.
only Amelia could save it.
But 20 years ago,
Finally,
I was known by
slowly,
another name.
He spoke.
Amelia Santos.
I apologize, he said through
Three-time
gritted
world
teeth.
Latin dance champion.
Louder, Amelia said.
The silence that followed was
And mean
deafening.
it.
Gregory
took a
Whitmore's
deep
mouth
breath,
fell open,
and something
his
in him
face
seemed
going
to
from
break.
purple to white in seconds.
When he spoke again, his
several
voice
people
was
in the
different,
crowd gasped,
smaller,
recognizing
almost
the name immediately.
I apologize,
This
Miss
woman here,
Santos.
he pointed at Amelia,
I have
who
treated
was
you
still
and
on her
others with
knees,
disrespect
obviously
and
lacks
cruelty
the
that was
grace and
unforgivable.
coordination to do even the
I let
simplest
my
job
wealth and
properly.
position blind me to the humanity
So I
of
propose
those I
a
considered
test.
beneath me.
The crowd
I
murmured,
was wrong.
some excited by the drama,
Completely and
others
utterly
clearly
wrong.
uncomfortable with where this
The
was
apology
heading.
continued for several
If
minutes,
she can dance a
and by the
proper
end,
waltz,
Gregory
Gregory
Whitmore
continued,
was crying,
his smile
perhaps
growing
for
crueler,
the first time in
better than any
decades.
woman here, I'll marry
Whether
her
they
to
were
my
tears
son.
of humiliation or genuine
Imagine
remorse,
that, the
no
heir
one
to
could
the Whitmore
say,
fortune
but they were
married to
real.
a maid who can't even
When
carry
he
a tray
finished,
without
Amelia
destroying
nodded
everything.
once, accepting the
The
apology
laughter that
without
followed
forgiving
was
the years
mixed,
of cruelty
some
that had
people
preceded
genuinely
it.
amused, others
Now,
laughing out of
she said,
discomfort or
turning to the
obligation.
crowd, I have a question
Daniel's
for all
face
of
had
you.
gone pale, his
How
hands
many of you
clenched
walked
into
past me
fists at
tonight
his sides.
before this happened?
"Dad,
How
stop
many of you
this.
have been served by me for years
You're drunk
without
and you're
ever
being
asking my
cruel."
name?
But
The
Gregory just
uncomfortable
laughed
shifting
harder.
in the crowd was answer enough.
"Cruel.
Patricia
I'm offering her
Harriman
the
was first to
opportunity
step
of a
forward.
lifetime.
I've attended
From Maid to
events here
millionaire.
for 5 years, she
All
said,
she has
her
to do
voice
is
shaking.
prove she can dance."
You've served me hundreds
Simple,
of times,
right?
and I never once looked you in
Amelia
the
slowly
eye.
stood up,
I'm
glass
ashamed.
crunching under her feet, her
One by
hands
one,
still bleeding.
others came forward with
She
similar
looked at Gregory
confessions,
Whitmore
the
for a
evening
long
transforming
moment,
from a
and something in her
charity gala
eyes
into
made him
something
step back
else
slightly.
entirely, a reckoning, perhaps,
It wasn't
or a
fear or
moment of
anger,
collective
but something
awakening.
else, something
The
deeper
hotel
and
manager,
more dangerous.
who had been watching from the corner,
Knowledge,
approached
perhaps.
Amelia with tears in his
Or
eyes.
memory.
Miss
"You
Santos,
want me to dance?"
I had
she
no
said,
idea.
her voice steady and
If
clear,
I had known.
cutting through the murmurs of the
But
crowd.
Amelia held up her hand.
"Yes," Gregory
Would
said,
it have mattered?
recovering his bluster.
Should it matter?
"Dance better than
Should
any
I have
woman
to be
here,
a former
and you'll
world
marry
champion
my
to
son.
be treated with respect?
Fail, and you're
He had
fired
no
immediately,
answer for that,
and I'll make
because
sure
they
you
both
never
knew
work
the
in this
truth.
city again."
By the end of
The
the
threat
evening,
hung in the air
Amelia
like a
had
weapon,
received dozens
designed
of
to
job
make her
offers,
back down,
from dance
to
studios
humiliate her
wanting
into
her to
submission.
teach, to corporations
But
wanting
Amelia
her to
did
speak
something
about
no one
diversity and
expected.
respect in the workplace.
She smiled.
But she turned them
Not
all
a
down,
happy smile,
at least for
not
the
a
moment.
defeated smile, but
I
the
need to
smile
think,
of someone
she
who had
said.
just been handed exactly
For
what 20 years, I've been someone else.
I accept, she said simply.
Now I need to figure out
the
who
ballroom
Amelia
erupted in
Santos
gasps
is in this
and
new
exclamations.
Daniel drove
The crash
her home
was
that night in
spectacular,
silence,
glasses
both of
shattering
them
across the
processing
marble
everything
floor,
that had happened.
champagne spraying
When
across
they
several
reached her
guests'
small
expensive
apartment
shoes,
building,
and
he walked her
Amelia
to the
falling
door.
hard onto her knees among
"Can
the
I
broken
ask you
glass.
something?" he said.
The entire ballroom
Why didn't
went
you tell
silent,
anyone who you
200
were?
pairs of eyes turning
Why
to
stay
stare
hidden
at the
for
scene.
so long?
Amelia's
Amelia
hands were
looked up
bleeding
at the
from the
stars,
glass,
barely
but she
visible
immediately
through the
began
city's
trying
light
to clean up
pollution.
the mess,
"Because
apologizing
I was
profusely
afraid,"
even
she
though it
admitted.
hadn't been her fault.
Afraid that if
I'm
people
so
knew
sorry.
who I used to
I'm
be,
so sorry.
they would pity
She
me
whispered,
for what I had become.
her voice barely audible
And
as
I
she
couldn't
picked up
bear
the
pity.
larger pieces of glass with her bare
Invisibility
hands.
was better than pity.
Gregory Whitmore's
Daniel
face
nodded,
turned purple with
understanding
rage as
more
he
than she
stormed
might have
over,
expected.
his expensive shoes
"I've been
crunching on the
invisible
broken
too,"
glass.
he said quietly.
"You incompetent fool,"
Just in a different
he roared,
way.
loud enough for everyone
Hidden
to
behind
hear.
my father's expectations.
"Do you have any
his
idea
money,
how much
his
those
name.
glasses cost?
Tonight, watching
More
you
than
dance,
you make in a month,
watching you
I
stand
bet."
up to him, it was like
Daniel
seeing
tried to
someone break
intervene,
free from
reaching
prison.
down to help Amelia.
And it made me realize
"Dad,
that I'm still
it
locked
was my
in
fault."
mind. They
I
stood
walked
there
into
for
her.
a moment, two people
But
from
Gregory
different worlds
pushed his
who had
son
found
aside
something
roughly.
in common in the most unlikely
"Don't
way.
you dare help her.
That dinner,
This is what
Amelia said
happens when they
finally.
hire people who don't
How
belong in
about
places
tomorrow
like
night?"
this."
Daniel
The way
smiled,
he said
the
people
first
made
genuine
it clear
smile
exactly
she had
what he
seen from
meant,
him all evening.
and several guests shifted
I would like that
uncomfortably
very
at the
much.
obvious racism in his
The
tone.
video of Amelia's dance
Amelia
went viral
kept her
within
head down,
hours,
continuing
shared
to
millions
clean,
of times with
her blood
captions
now
like,
mixing
"Maid
with the
reveals
spilled
she's world
champagne on the
champion,"
white marble
and
floor.
"Millionaires bet backfires
You know what?
spectacularly."
Gregory suddenly
outlets
announced,
picked up
his
the
voice
story,
carrying
and within
across
a
the
week,
entire ballroom.
Amelia Santos was a household
"This is
name
perfect.
again, but for entirely
Absolutely
different reasons
perfect."
than before.
He
She
laughed,
appeared on
but
talk
it was
shows,
an ugly sound,
always wearing
full
simple
of malice
clothes,
and superiority.
always speaking quietly but firmly
"Ladies
about
and
the
gentlemen,
dignity of work
I have
and
a
the importance
proposition.
of seeing people for who they
A bet,
truly are.
if you will."
The Gregory
He
Whitmore
walked to the center of the room,
which had been a
spreading
tax
his
shelter
arms wide
disguised
like a
as charity,
ringmaster at a
was
circus.
transformed into a genuine
Act like it
organization
matters.
dedicated to providing scholarships
Daniel
and
pulled away
support
from
for
his
service
father's
workers
grip,
seeking
his jaw
education or
tight with
career
suppressed
changes.
anger. "I know
Gregory
what I
himself
represent,
stepped down
Dad.
from his company's board.
You
His son
remind me
Daniel
every
taking
single
over with
day."
a very different vision for
The
the future.
tension between them was thick
And
enough to
Amelia-
cut with a knife, but
She
Gregory
opened a
just
dance
laughed,
studio in the
that
neighborhood
cold
where she
laugh that
lived,
made employees
offering
shiver
free
and
classes
business
to anyone
partners
who worked
nervous.
in service industries.
If you knew what you
The
represented,
studio
you
was
wouldn't
called
be such a
Invisible
disappointment.
No More, and above the
Maybe
door was a
tonight we'll
simple
finally
plaque
find
that
you a
read,
proper
"Everyone
wife,
has a story.
someone who can teach you what real
Everyone
success
has a
looks
gift.
like."
Everyone
Amelia heard
deserves to
every word
dance."
as she arranged champagne
6 months
glasses on
later,
a silver
Daniel
tray,
and Amelia
her movements
were married in a
careful and
simple
deliberate.
ceremony at her studio.
She had learned
surrounded
long
not
ago
by
that the rich
society's
talked
elite,
as
but
if
by
the help
hotel
didn't have
workers,
ears,
janitors,
as if their uniforms
security
made them
guards,
deaf to
and
secrets
others who had
and
been
cruelty
inspired by
spoken
her
in
story
plain
to
sight.
pursue their own dreams.
As the ballroom filled with
Gregory
guests,
attended,
Amelia
a
moved
changed
between
man
them
who
like a
spent most
shadow,
of the reception
offering
talking
drinks,
to the servers,
collecting empty
learning their
glasses,
names,
always
their stories,
present but
their
never
dreams.
seen. She
The
watched
waltz they
Gregory
danced
work
at
the
the
room,
wedding was the
his
same
voice
one from
booming
that
with
night at
false
the
warmth
hotel,
as he
but
greeted
this
business
time,
partners
Daniel
and potential
danced with her,
investors.
having learned from the best
Every
teacher
few
in the
minutes,
world.
he would grab Daniel's
As they
arm and
spun
drag
around
him
the
into
floor,
another
Amelia
conversation,
whispered in his ear,
introducing him
"Your
to another
father's
eligible
cruel bet
young
gave
woman
me my
from a
life
wealthy
back."
family, his
Daniel
desperation to
pulled her
marry off his
closer
son
and whispered
becoming
back,
more
"And
obvious
it
with
gave me
each
mine."
introduction.
The crowd
"This is the
applauded,
Harrison
but this
girl,"
time it
Gregory
wasn't for
would
a
say,
performance or a
pushing
show.
Daniel forward.
It was for love.
Her father
for
owns half
redemption,
the shipping
for the
companies
proof
on
that
the East
sometimes
Coast.
the worst intentions can
Or
lead to the
meet
best
Miss Chen,
outcomes,
her
and that
family's
everyone,
tech empire is
regardless
worth
of their
billions.
uniform or their station,
Each
has the
time,
potential for
Daniel would
greatness.
politely shake hands,
Years
exchange
later,
a few
when people
words,
told the
then
story
find
of
an
the night a
excuse to
millionaire
slip
mocked
away,
Maid only
his
to discover
discomfort
she was a
growing more
dance
visible.
champion, they would focus
It was
on
during
different
one of these
parts.
escapes that disaster struck.
Some loved the romance,
Daniel,
the unlikely
walking
love
backward
story
to avoid
between the
another
heir and the
introduction,
maid.
collided directly
Others
with
focused
Amelia
on the
as she carried a
comeuppance,
full
the
tray of
bully getting his
champagne.
just desserts.
"If you dance
But
this
Amelia
waltz,
always
you marry my
emphasized a
son."
different lesson when she told the
Millionaire
story to her
mocked,
students,
but Black
many
Maid
of whom
was
were
dance
service
champion.
workers pursuing their dreams.
The crystal chandelier in the Grand
point
Meridian
isn't that I
Hotel
was
ballroom
secretly a
cast
champion,
dancing
she
shadows
would say.
across the marble floor as
The
Amelia
point is that I
Jackson
was
carefully
worthy of
polished the
respect
last
even when I
wine
was
glass
just a
for the
maid.
evening's charity gala.
My dancing didn't make me
Her
valuable.
worn hands moved with practiced
I was
precision,
always
making
valuable.
sure every surface
The
gleamed
dancing just
perfectly
made
under
them
the
see
golden
it.
lights.
And in her
She had been
studio,
working
where
at
the
this
mirrors
hotel for 8
reflected not
years,
just bodies
always in the
but
background,
dreams, where the
always
music
invisible
played
to
for
the wealthy
anyone who wanted
guests
to
who
hear
swept
it,
through
where
these halls in
janitors
their
and
designer
CEOs
gowns and
learned
expensive
side by
suits.
side. That lesson lived
Tonight
on.
was supposed to be just
Because
another
everyone
event,
has a
another
story.
night of serving drinks and
Everyone
cleaning
has
up
a
after
gift.
people who never even noticed
And
she
everyone,
existed.
absolutely everyone,
But fate had other
deserves the
plans,
chance to dance.
and by the end of this evening, every single person in that ballroom would know her name, her story, and the terrible price of judging someone by the uniform they wear.
It became
the clock on the wall showed 6:30 when the first guests began arriving, their laughter echoing through the vast space like bells announcing their importance to the world.
A genius,
Amelia adjusted her black and white maid uniform, tucked a strand of her graying hair behind her ear, and prepared herself for another long night of being a ghost in plain sight.
One person willing to stand
Gregory
up and
Whitmore
say,
arrived
"I am
at
more than
exactly
you think
7
I am,"
o'clock,
to change
as he
everything.
always did for events he hosted,
Amelia
his
Santos
presence
proved that on
commanding
a night
attention
when
the moment he
Millionaire's
stepped through the
became her
doors.
stage, when a
He
cruel
was
bet
62
became her
years old,
opportunity,
with silver
and when a
hair
waltz
that cost
became her
more to
revolution.
maintain than most people's monthly
She had been
rent,
invisible
and a
for
suit
20
that
years,
probably cost
but when
more
she
than
finally
Amelia
let
made in a
herself be
year.
seen, She didn't just dance.
Behind him walked his son, Daniel,
She soared.
28 years old and clearly uncomfortable in his formal attire,
around her,
his eyes
showing
scanning the
them that
room
only
as if
thing
looking
more
for an
powerful
escape
than
route.
prejudice is the courage to
Stand up
and
straight,
dance in spite
Gregory
of it.
hissed at his son, grabbing his shoulder roughly.
You represent the Whitmore name.